In this video, I'm going to explain how I converted the barrels from a 4-cylinder Kawasaki Z1 into 6-cylinder to fit my new Super 6 engine. It's going to be 1522cc. The first thing I have to do is to decide which sets of barrels I'm going to use for the inner cylinders and which sets I'm going to use for the outer cylinders. Now this depends entirely on the condition of the fins. I like to choose the best barrel for the outer fins, so I'm going to choose this one here that's only got one broken fin. And this one here that's got various broken fins, I'll use for the inner cylinders. So the outer cylinders get cut down the centre, so I've got a pair of cylinders each side. And this set will be cut there, and I'll just use the centre portion. Before I can start cutting the barrels, I need to remove the liners, so I etch each liner to correspond with the bore it came out of, so I can replace them in the same place. Then, take the barrel outside and put it into my barbecue to warm up. I put the first set of barrels into the barbecue and shut the lid so they warms up to temperature. Once it's at a temperature, I remove that set of barrels, take it into the garage, replacing it with the other set of barrels to warm up while I'm pressing the liners out of the first set of barrels. Back in the garage, I put the barrels onto my press, set up a suitable size spacer and push the liners out. They come out very, very easily. They're only just gripping slightly, using hardly any force whatsoever. With the first liner out, I proceed to the next liner, positioning the aluminium spacer on top first, and then lowering the ram down, and that one just fell straight out. So there we go, all 4 liners are now out of the first set of barrels. So I return to the barbecue and notice the temperature's gone right up, and when I opened the door, the liners had literally just fallen out on their own. So obviously I didn't heat it up enough the first time. This is so much easier. And 3 of them just lifted straight out. And the 4th one was just a little tiny bit stuck. So I went into the garage and gave that a little tap with an aluminium bar and it fell straight out. I thought I'd measure the temperature of the barrels just for reference to the future. 112 degrees. So I now know to heat them up to 112 degrees. With all the liners out, both barrels, I proceed to do the cutting through the first set through the cam chain tunnel. Sometimes the castings are a little bit hard due to silicon probably in the aluminium, so I add a bit of ZX1 oil. It makes a huge difference. With the first side of the cam tunnel cut, I reverse the barrels in the vise to cut the opposite side. With the first set of barrels cut in half, I place them on the bench and slide them up behind the other set of barrels so you can see how they're going to form when they're joined together. The rear is the outer and the front will be the middle. So before I start cutting the front, I scribe 2 nice lines and then I'm going to go out to my bandsaw because it's so much easier than using the hacksaw. In the shed, I adjust my bandsaw so that the barrels will pass underneath and allow me to cut to the scribed lines that I'd scratched earlier. It's a slow process, but you have to persevere. I give the bandsaw blade a quick spray of ZX1. It helps the cutting. Well, that's both the end bits cut off. And the funny thing is I stuck them together and it looks like a weird engine with a funny shaped piston, but that can go in the spares part. Always good to keep the bits for fins, for repairing fins. And there's the centre portion that's cut out. So now I offer up the 2 outer portions to get a rough idea of where I've got to machine it down to get the right width. The first thing I do is set up the centre portion of my milling machine using the horizontal cutter to mill the end surfaces true and flat. This can take quite a while. You can't take a very big cut because the fins could snap off, so it's just gentle as you go. With all the surfaces machined flat on all three components, I line it up on the bench with a rule to scribe the fins so I can start trimming the fins to size. Then, using my hacksaw, I cut the edges off that I don't need to trim it to size. With the excess fins cut off, I use my coarse file to file them down to the line and to make them look smooth and nice. With the first side filed down nice, I start cutting the other side off to remove the excess fins. And once this is cut off, I then have to file them down flat and then repeat this on the other casting as well. It takes a while, but the end result is worth it. With all the fins filed to size, I now concentrate on the top surface where bits of the old casting are sticking out and are proud. So I mark these off with my marker pen and then file them down with my coarse file until it's smooth with the existing fins. With the top surfaces complete, I now concentrate on that broken fin from earlier on. So the first thing you do is use a stainless steel wire brush and give it a good rub to remove any oxidation and paint and bits of mess. Then with my TIG welder, you build up a weld starting at the bottom and gradually working your way up to the top, not worrying about how big it is because you can always file it down. Well, here's the finished weld where the fin was broken, and here's the fin once it's been filed. Then had the barrels media blasted so they're all clean, ready for welding. And before I could weld them, I had to bolt them onto the crankcases of my engine to hold them in the right place. Then I put all the liners upside down in the recess on the barrels, and using a rule, I made sure they're all in line and the barrels were sitting flat on the crankcases. When I was happy, I removed all the liners and tightened up the head bolts tight. With the liners removed, I double checked that the head was still flat, and it was perfectly in line. So I got my 17mm spanner and tightened the studs down to hold the 3 bits of barrel in place tight on the crankcases, ready for welding. With all the bolts tight, I switched on my TIG welder and connected the earth strap to the barrels. With the welded joints complete along the top of the barrels and down the fins where I could reach, I removed the barrels from the engine so I could file flat the welds. I transferred the barrels to my milling machine table and bolted them down secure on a nice flat surface, then proceeded to file very carefully the top surface flat, just removing the weld raised area. I now had to remove some tiny bits of weld on the surfaces of the recess where the liners go. So I used my Dremel with a carbide burr, very carefully remove weld from the side only, being careful not to touch the flat face at the bottom of the recess. A quick check with the liners to make sure they fit, and they fitted lovely. So that's that done. I can blow off with an airline to remove all the dust, and I can take the barrels off, turn them upside down and bolt them back down again onto my milling machine and weld the bottom side joints. With the barrels clamped upside down in place on the milling machine, I get out the TIG welder and weld all the joints that I can get to across the bottom face and down the fins. I then smooth down the 2 sets of welds with my coarse file until it's flush. Then I remove the barrels from the milling machine and use my Dremel with carbide burrs to file down the little welds between the fins. With all the welds ground down, I now use little sanding discs on the Dremel to polish the welds, getting in between the fins the best I can. With all the fin welds polished and the top and bottom surfaces flat, it's time to replace the liners into their original holes in the bore. So to do that, I first put the barrel in my barbecue to warm it up. With the barrels nice and warm, I return it to my hydraulic press and start pressing in the liners. They take no effort and slide straight in. I check with my thumb that it's flush, which it is, then I proceed to the next liner. With all the liners pressed in, the next thing to do is to trial fit it on the engine and see that it fits. This is the first trial fit of the barrels, just to check that the liners fit down in all the stubs, because these are the bigger 1015cc liners. They're slightly larger than the Z1 liners, but they fitted lovely and look great. The next thing I need to do is hone the cylinders, because these are original bores and I just need to take the glaze off so the new rings will seat in nicely. And to do that, I'm going to use my 4-stone hone and my electric drill. Before I can hone the cylinders, I need to put a bit of white spirit in each bore. This acts as a lubricant and helps the stones cut rather than skidding over the surface. With the drill running on its slowest setting, I traverse the hone in and out of the cylinder bore to give a nice cross-hatched finish. I then repeat the honing process for the other 5 cylinders in turn until they're all nice and smooth with a cross-hatched finish. With the cylinder honing complete, I give the bores a quick wipe round with some cloth soaked in white spirit, just to clean off any bits. I then place the 6 pistons in the barbecue just to warm up a little bit to allow the gudgeon pins to slide in easily. While they're warming up, I put a bit of oil on each little end bearing, just to help the gudgeon pins slide through. With the pistons all warm from the barbecue, the gudgeon pins slide in easily. I'm fitting them to the engine temporarily just to check that the barrels will fit. I won't be fitting rings at this stage. With all the pistons fitted, I go across the bench and get the barrels and offer up the 2 central pistons first, engaging the bores, and gently lowering down on the other 2 pistons, and then finally the outside pistons until the barrel drops down firmly onto its seat. I rotate the crankshaft by hand and the pistons go up and down perfectly. So that's the barrels finished. I'm really pleased how they've turned out.